When he was a young boy, Akemitsu Akagamai was taught by his father that a person should have as many lovers as possible. However, this eventually led Akemitsu's father to abandon him so that he could pursue his womanizing ways. This traumatized the young Akemitsu, who still holds a grudge against his father now that he is older. Akemitsu is determined to be completely different from his father, and he wants to prove a man can live and be happy completely alone, and with no woman. He absolutely refuses to fall in love and ignores all the dating advice he gets. His family reputation still haunts him as well, because his father was so famous for his playboy habits. One night, Akemitsu is heading home when he gets run over by a straw barrel. He meets a cute girl named Yuzuki Aoba who accidentally dropped the barrel on him, and he instantly falls in love. Seeing how dangerous this is, Akemitsu quickly ran away to head home and forget what happened. The next day, his friends become shocked when Akemitsu decides to join them in drinking and meeting girls for the first time. And after a fun night, Akemitsu realizes that his family madness has infected him, and he is affected by his feelings. He decides he must do something drastic and decides he must drop out of school to become a monk in the countryside to avoid his desires. He flees to a remote temple called the Mikuzuki Temple, a remote male-only temple. But when he arrives at the temple, the first person he meets is actually Yuzuki. After an uncomfortable meeting where Akemitsu thinks he is dreaming, Akemitsu desperately tries to run away again, but he becomes injured. In the end, he loses control of himself and proposes marriage. Yuzuki decides to have tea with him to clear up their misunderstandings, but Yuzuki was actually supposed to have a meeting with a marriage prospect, and she confuses the prospect for him. Akemitsu decides to step out to clear his head, but when he sees the temple cat Niyogasuke in a well, he accidentally falls into the well himself trying to save Niyogasuke. Meanwhile, Yuzuki is shocked to find out that Akemitsu is not actually her marriage candidate. Her sister Tsukuyo Aoba arrives, and the both of them get scared of a returning Akemitsu who is injured from the well. After a misunderstanding where they mistake him for a ghostly revengeful spirit, they run away from Akemitsu and run into Kurage Aoba, their youngest sister, who passes out in fear but is caught by Akemitsu. Meanwhile, Kagura Baldwin and Mia Kristoff, two visiting guests to the temple, are practicing calligraphy when they hear the commotion. Mia tries to investigate but gets headbutted by Akemitsu by accident. Finally, Akemitsu catches up to the Aoba sisters and Yuzuki uses her priestess combat skills to knock him out. Later, the head priestess of the temple Kiki corrects the misunderstanding and explains that Akemitsu is a new monk joining the temple. Meanwhile, Akemitsu is shocked to discover that the Mikuzuki temple is not a male-only temple at all, and had recently been converted into a temple for priestesses. Yuzuki is apologetic for beating him up, but Akemitsu feels some ill feelings toward him. Kiki suggests that they allow Akemitsu to stay as a monk anyway because they can give him grunt work and use him for hard labor. Some of the priestesses are swayed by this argument, but Mia and Tsukuyo angrily disagree. Akemitsu decides to leave anyway, thanking Yuzuki for helping him, but that he intends to join a different temple. While waiting for the bus home, Yuzuki finds him camping out at the bench because the next bus is in the morning. She invites him to stay one night at the temple since there is a lot of space there, but he still declines. They end up talking about their first meeting, and Yuzuki becomes embarrassed remembering his marriage proposal. But after they formally introduce themselves to each other, Yuzuki realizes that he is the son of the man who cheated the temple for millions of yen. They return to the temple where the group try to decide how he should repay his debt, and they consider the slave or the organ trade. And everyone becomes shocked when Yuzuki suggests his body, after embarrassingly clearing up the misunderstanding, saying that he should work off his debt. Nia and Tsukuyo try to argue, but are intimidated by Yuzuki's strength. Yuzuki shows Akemitsu the temple, and he quickly becomes remorseful for his father's action after seeing the temple in a bad state due to how poor they are. Meanwhile, Tsukuyo and Mia lead a meeting to find a way to kick Akemitsu out of the temple. Kiki arrives and suggests that one of the priestesses could try to seduce him, which could lead to his expulsion. The girls decide unanimously that Tsukuyo should be the one to do it. The next morning, Akemitsu wakes up to get as many chores done as possible, but he becomes distracted by Yuzuki in her pajamas. Meanwhile, a spying Tsukuyo is very unimpressed. Later, when Akemitsu serves breakfast, Tsukuyo is shocked that he is a better cook than all of the priestesses. Tsukuyo decides to put her plans into action, and she gives him bad and uncomfortable work clothes and assigns him cleaning duty. But Tsukuyo is shocked when he happily cleans everything, and even helps with the temple accounting. Finally, Tsukuyo decides to dump cold water on him using training as an excuse, so that he will become sick and leave. Akemitsu is uncomfortable, but becomes heartened when he sees a passing Yuzuki in school uniform and claims to have reached true enlightenment unaffected by the cold. Later, while Akemitsu is taking a bath, Tsukuyo decides to ambush him to get him kicked out. She fails due to her embarrassment, but they end up kissing after falling over each other. Yuzuki catches them, and a disappointed Yuzuki orders Akemitsu to leave. Although the other girls congratulate Tsukuyo for her successful plan, she starts to feel bad, especially after Yuzuki won't talk to her. But it turns out, Yuzuki was just embarrassed to catch Tsukuyo, and Akemitsu together, and she knew about her plan to kick him out from Kiki anyway. The two sisters have a chat where Tsukuyo asks why Yuzuki is letting Akemitsu stay at a temple for priestesses. Yuzuki doesn't have an answer, but she feels that it would have been what their mother would have wanted and that she sees great potential in Akemitsu. Tsukuyo starts to be persuaded that he could stay, but the two of them become shocked when Kiki tells them that Akemitsu has packed his things and left. Meanwhile, a remorseful Akemitsu has decided to turn himself into the police for disorderly conduct and kissing a girl accidentally, but the police kick him out. He tries to return to his apartment in the city, but discovers that his landlord has already sold his place and threw out his belongings. And now homeless Akemitsu lives in a cardboard box and decides that he must somehow repay the temple by selling his organs. A surprised Yuzuki finds him under the bridge, and she clarifies that she didn't kick him out and just wanted him to leave the bath. She tells him as a child he should listen to his elders, but when they discover that he is 4 years older than her, she tells him that adults should listen to the youth more. She announces her intention to help him reach enlightenment, and tells him to return to the temple. Meanwhile, Tsukuyo arrives and apologizes for her behavior. She also gives him a new debt to pay off for accidentally kissing her. They return to the temple, where Mia is shocked that Akemitsu is now returning. Tsukuyo still isn't comfortable with having him around, but she will tolerate his presence. Akemitsu has a conversation with Tsukuyo and Kurage, where Kurage reveals that Yuzuki used to be unreliable and somewhat clumsy growing up. Kurage helps him make dinner, but Akemitsu is shocked when Kurage starts to say problematic things which contrasts her innocent demeanor. She tells him that Yuzuki used to be the same, but that her sister had to grow up quickly. She then tricks him into entering the bath where he gets beat up. Finally, Mia arrives, announcing that she will stop the temple from falling into depravity and get rid of him once and for all. Mia decides that kicking him out will not be enough. She orders him to duel her, and if she wins she will sterilize him. They are shocked when Akemitsu seems enthusiastic about the operation. As part of the challenge, the sisters leave the temple to give Akemitsu and Mia space for their duel. Akemitsu isn't quite sure why Mia dislikes him so much, and he seems to have forgotten that he headbutted her when they met. Mia announces their challenge will be duel with katanas, because Mia traveled from overseas to study the art of the sword in Japan. Akemitsu decides to use his bare fists to stop the sword, and a wardrobe accident ends up with Mia losing the duel. Kagura decides that she will decide the losing condition, and shows Mia a book of mysterious torture devices. But Akemitsu decides Mia, and demands the book instead. Unfortunately, Mia misinterprets his request for the book and she runs away in fear. Akemitsu goes to sleep disappointed he could not get the book, which could help him reach enlightenment. That night, Mia visits Akemitsu to try to make amends, and in his tired state he believes he is dreaming. After discovering Kagura filming them, Akemitsu tells Mia that she should protect her purity, and that all he wanted was the torture book. A shocked Mia runs away, humiliated by her miscommunication. Eventually, Mia calms down and returns to the temple. She meets Akemitsu in a storage room, but they discover that Kagura has purposefully locked them together. After trying to get out, they decide to call for help in the morning. Akemitsu explores the room to find a strange table, which Mia reluctantly tells him is a table used to display the heads of traitors. After Mia sneezes, Akemitsu insists on giving Mia a blanket, and she accidentally confesses she is avoiding him because she finds him attractive. An embarrassed Mia starts to cry, and after they calm down she asks him to forget what she said. Mia reveals that she came to Japan because she wanted to escape her family, an old and distinguished bloodline that is obsessed with marrying beautiful people. Mia's mother was a known seductress, and Mia became isolated at school. She eventually made friends with Kagura, and the two of them left for Japan to explore Zen Buddhism, which eventually led them to the Mikuzuki Temple. Mia hoped that the temple would be a refuge for her to escape her family history, but Akemitsu has now ruined things. Akemitsu is touched, because his family situation is the same, and they both cry together over their tragic backstories. Mia wonders if they are fated to meet because the two of them have such similar circumstances, but she starts to doubt herself. Akemitsu cheers her up by announcing that both of them can escape their family history by pursuing enlightenment together, and the two of them reconcile so they can study Buddhism. Meanwhile, Kagura arrives to free them and gives them the book on torture devices. But the next morning, after Yuzuki finds them training, she punishes Akemitsu. Meanwhile, Kiki reminds Yuzuki that her marriage candidate was supposed to arrive today, and she is late to her appointment. Akemitsu helps her to prepare, and they rush to the meeting. Akemitsu discovers that Yuzuki is hoping to get married so that they can have a new head priest for the temple. This is because the Mikuzuki will close and the family will have to move out if it doesn't have a head priest, and Kiki can only stay as the head priestess for another year. Yuzuki wants to protect the temple at all costs, so Akemitsu helps her by borrowing a bike. But after it runs out of gas, Yuzuki leads them into a moving truck, mistaking the truck as a bus. She becomes depressed because they will definitely be late to the meeting, but Akemitsu announces that he will help her at all costs, and will try to break down the truck door. With the future of her family shrine at stake, Priestess Yuzuki and the boy-turned-monk Akemitsu rush to Yuzuki's marriage candidate appointment. But after Yuzuki makes several mistakes navigating the city, they end up getting trapped in a truck. Luckily, Akemitsu is able to break through the truck doors and commandeer the vehicle. Yuzuki must get married soon, because the lack of a head priest for the Mikuzuki temple means that it will soon be shut down. After a rough landing, Akemitsu and Yuzuki makes it to a neighboring Ryukoku temple for her matchmaking meeting. Akemitsu says his goodbyes and wishes her luck, but while waiting for her, one of the priestesses of the temple mistakes him for one of their monks and drags him away for work. Meanwhile, Yuzuki meets her marriage candidate, a monk named Kijo-hon, and she starts to talk about her life at the Mikuzuki temple when she suddenly spots Akemitsu working nearby. Akemitsu starts beating himself up when he becomes worried that his presence is distracting, but things get worse when the matchmaker becomes sick and Akemitsu needs to take his place. The horrified Yuzuki is worried that Akemitsu will mess up the meeting, and her worry starts to increase when during the interview Akemitsu becomes jealous and angry when Kijo starts to talk about a future life with Yuzuki. Soon enough, Akemitsu passes out in rage and has to be dragged away. But when Kijo tells Yuzuki he has a good sense of her character, she admits that she is lying, that she wants to be married. Yuzuki actually just wants to save the temple, and she was given advice to try to find a marriage candidate to save the shrine, but later divorce the priest because she isn't interested in being tied down. Kijo is understanding of the situation, but he also points out that the Mikuzuki temple is in a terrible shape due to their poor finances and that the temple may not be worth protecting. Suddenly, Akemitsu appears, distraught over the role his father played in bankrupting the temple, and he swears to do anything he can to help save it. When Kijo attempts to leave, Akemitsu begs him to help, and Kijo begins to question Akemitsu on his dedication. After asking if Akemitsu will support Yuzuki for the rest of his life and help protect the temple, Yuzuki realizes that Kijo is almost asking Akemitsu to give marriage vows. In the end, Kijo agrees to the engagement to help save the temple, even though his interference displeases his head priestess. Later that night, Yuzuki and Akemitsu head back, and the priestess apologizes to him for all the trouble. Though when Akemitsu realizes that the temple will stay open, and he won't be homeless, he starts dancing happily in the street, leading an embarrassed Yuzuki to hug him. Unfortunately for the pair, the last train has already left for the night, leaving them stranded. Noticing that Yuzuki won't be able to make it back to the temple with her sandals, they end up taking shelter in a nearby love hotel to Akemitsu's shock and discomfort. After they check in, Akemitsu realizes that Yuzuki has no idea what the true purpose of the hotel usually is. Akemitsu tries to hide the truth from her, but this fails when Yuzuki accidentally turns on the television. Both Akemitsu and Yuzuki struggle with the realization that they are in a love hotel, with Yuzuki thinking about Akemitsu's dedication to her during the matchmaking meeting. She wants to ask Akemitsu about his intentions, but is exasperated when he ties himself up to a cross to punish himself for entering a love hotel. The next morning, they make their way back to the temple and try to pretend nothing happened. Later, Yuzuki and her sister Tsukuyo are making their way to school, when Tsukuyo asks her sister about what happened after the marriage meeting. After finding out that Yuzuki went to a love hotel with Akemitsu, she reminds her sister to keep quiet about a young man living in the temple at school because the temple is technically supposed to be a nunnery. Tsukuyo also wants to make sure that the family reputation is preserved at school. Unfortunately, as soon as Tsukuyo gets to school, her friends confront her about rumors that she got a boyfriend and that some of the classmates had seen her kissing a man in monk robes. Tsukuyo realizes that the rumors are misunderstanding a previous situation with Akemitsu, but she is unable to dispel the rumors when her friends start to celebrate. To make matters worse, Akemitsu appears on campus wearing his monk robes to help deliver her lunch. Before he can interact with her classmates, Tsukuyo quickly ambushes him with a disguise to prevent him from accidentally triggering more rumors. She takes him to the nurse's office, but also stops him from leaving because there are too many students around the school. Suddenly her friends arrive, and she has to hide Akemitsu with her on a bed, leaving them in a cramped situation. They both try to make do with this terrible situation, while Akemitsu discovers that Tsukuyo has recently quit her position in the archery club. After her friends leave, the monk wonders why she had left the archery club, though when he excitedly proclaims his support, they end up getting discovered by her friends anyway. Tsukuyo had actually joined the archery club inspired by her older sister, but when Yuzuki had to take care of the temple, she was forced to quit the club, and Tsukuyo decided to quit as well. Meanwhile, Akemitsu is cleaning the temple the following day when Yuzuki shows off her archery skills, advising him that it is a useful activity for meditation. Inspired by her demonstration, Akemitsu looks for Tsukuyo to talk about archery, but the middle sister is hiding in her room. The monk decides to use a rope to get to her window, and he tells her that he finished all the chores around the temple so that she could have time to rejoin the archery club. But to his surprise, Tsukuyo tells him she isn't interested, and she leaves the temple on an errand. However, when Tsukuyo walks by the nearby archery range, she can't help herself, but walks in on the pretext to help clean the archery hall. She finds herself unintentionally practicing archery when she discovers Akemitsu has followed her. After they leave the archery hall, Akemitsu wonders why she won't rejoin the archery club because she appears so interested in the sport. But Tsukuyo reveals that her older sister Yuzuki is much better at archery than her, and she feels that she doesn't deserve to be able to do archery if her more skilled sister had to quit to take care of the temple. Akemitsu tells her not to feel guilty about the responsibility her sister has had to take, and he brings her to see Yuzuki practicing archery as a form of meditative practice. He also shows Tsukuyo how terrible her older sister really is in archery, and that Yuzuki's fabled skills as a figment of Tsukuyo's imagination. Yuzuki reveals that she actually quit the club not because she was too busy taking care of the temple, but because no matter how hard she practiced, she was always terrible at archery. Afterwards, the sisters reconcile with each other, and later that night Tsukuyo tells Akemitsu that she has decided to return to the archery club, and when she asks him why he helped her, he responds that understands her struggle to pursue her passion while being held back by family circumstances. A grateful Tsukuyo then seems to kiss him, but she pulls away to write an idiot on his forehead instead. The next day Akemitsu prepares lunch for her, and she decides to formally introduce him to her friends at the archery club as a monk at their temple. Meanwhile, Kurage is thinking about all the changes that have happened recently at the temple while writing in her diary. She appreciates the presence of Akemitsu especially since her family seems to be happier lately, and she will never run out of things to write about since chaos keeps happening at the temple due to him. Later, Yuzuki discovers that she has gained weight recently. She speaks with the rest of the temple and discusses the possibility that their weight scale has become cursed by a spirit since it seems to be reading everybody's weight. Refusing to acknowledge that they have all gained weight, they come up with different strategies like dieting and exercise, and with Tsukuyo's suggestion they all start yoga exercises. But although they start off strong, the girls eventually give up and are unable to continue. Their next plan is dieting, and Yuzuki discusses the possibility of asking Akemitsu to cook less food for them to eat. None of the girls want to reveal they have gained weight to Akemitsu, but Kurage reveals that she would willingly give up one of her sisters if she could keep eating the food that they get. Instead, she asks one of her sisters to marry him so that he can stay at the temple forever to cook for them. After persuading her against the idea, Yuzuki thinks that since Akemitsu cooks healthy food it might be okay for them to do nothing, until he arrives with freshly cooked sweets for them to eat, which completely eliminates all their weight loss progress. The next day Yuzuki asks Akemitsu to start adding vegetables to all their meals, but after he agrees he spots her holding an old axe. Frightened with the possibility that she is practicing her beheading skills, Akemitsu desperately tries to make an excellent meal so that she won't get angry and attack him. But when Yuzuki has no reaction to his cooking, the monk continuously passes out in fear. He later finds Yuzuki struggling on the ground and fears that he will be attacked. But the head priestess Kiki tells him that Yuzuki is practicing a skill that head priests need to learn where they react to nothing, and hold the same position for 2 days. This also explains why she had no reaction to his cooking and why she had an axe earlier that day, since firewood chopping is important to the training. Inspired by her dedication, Akemitsu asks if he could join the training as well, and since he has been working hard at the temple, Kiki gives him permission to train with Yuzuki. Meanwhile, Mia overhears them as well and decides to join, which slightly annoys Yuzuki. They first start with learning several sutras and bowing positions from Kiki, and Akemitsu is surprised that this is a core skill that monks need to learn, which means he hasn't actually become a monk yet. Yuzuki arrives to demonstrate how ignoring sensations will lead to enlightenment, but she becomes easily distracted and fails. As they watch her perform firewood chopping, Kiki tells them that Yuzuki isn't a true priestess yet either, since she is still undergoing her training. A determined Akemitsu rushes to Yuzuki and declares he will support her and help her become a true priestess. But before they can start training, Kijo from the Ryukoku temple makes a sudden visit. After surprising the inhabitants of the temple, Kijo announces his intention to inspect the temple, which he finds to be in a state of serious disrepair. The normally calm Kiki reacts angrily to his presence, especially when Kijo is disappointed that Yuzuki hasn't actually completed her priestess training yet. He then announces that if in 3 months' time Yuzuki doesn't pass her training, he will break off the engagement, which will force their temple to close. Dead priestess Kiki helps to train Yuzuki alongside Akemitsu and Mia, another girl who lives in the shrine. To start their training, the 3 of them are shocked when Kiki tells them they must change their undergarments to be white to reflect the purity of their future training. The next part of their training is to be able to sit in absolute silence and stillness for hours, and if they move, Kiki will whack them with her stick. This sort of training, called Zazen, is a major reason for why Akemitsu decided to become a monk. But unfortunately, he keeps getting distracted when his training partners get hit, which eventually makes him fail as well. Afterwards, Kiki makes them practice calligraphy, where Akemitsu is unusually skilled at the task due to prior training. Unfortunately, Yuzuki proves to be pretty terrible at calligraphy, and Mia knocks a bunch of ink on him, which only prompts Yuzuki to beat him up. Nia and Akemitsu later apologize for slowing down Yuzuki's training at the mall, where they buy supplies to help them train. They encourage Yuzuki, but the three of them are all furious to find out Kiki wants them all to sleep together in one room. Akemitsu comes up with a strategy of wrapping themselves up to avoid any problems. Meanwhile, Kiki is worried about Kijo and his plans as she senses there might be some trouble with the Tokyudo itself. She thinks their shrine might need to cheat to win. But the next morning she finds that her 3 trainees didn't manage to get any sleep, so she gives them a reward. But the reward also happens to be a trip to the mixed bath. Kiki tells them it is also part of the training, as they must fortify their mind against any disturbing thoughts about the opposite gender, although they fail at first, and they only grow more embarrassed talking about their training with each other so far. They are eventually encouraged by Yuzuki, who pretends to successfully resist any temptation towards Akemitsu, even though she has started growing feelings for him. As time passes, Kiki starts to determine their training is improving, so she decides to give them the afternoon off. But she also gives them the cryptic advice of setting aside fame and fortune. Yuzuki tells the others that this is also a test, and resting is critical to achieving enlightenment. Unfortunately for Akemitsu, the day off happens to be on Christmas Eve, which is particularly traumatic for him due to his father's womanizing ways. Yuzuki decides to take him into town for Christmas Eve to cheer him up, but he panics because of the connotations of a couple going out together on Christmas Eve. He tries his hardest not to enjoy the holiday, but he still ends up having fun with Yuzuki anyway and fails. Later, the two of them head to a shop for prayer beads run by Yuzuki's friend Mary. Mary decides to offer them couple prayer beads, which are often used by couples in Buddhist weddings because she confuses them to be dating. After they clear up the confusion, she reminds them that they happen to be out together on Christmas Eve, and Yuzuki quickly realizes the connotations. After they leave the shop in embarrassment, the two of them comfort each other, with Akemitsu appreciating Yuzuki's attempt to cheer him up. Meanwhile, at the shrine, Yuzuki's sisters Tsukuyo and Kurage are making fun of Mia, because when Akemitsu first arrived at the shrine she was very hostile to him, but has now significantly become warmer with the monk. Mia's friend Kagura tells them they have all changed as a result of him arriving at the shrine, but secretly she plots to get rid of him. The next day the whole shrine has a party to celebrate Christmas, although since they are a shrine they just call it an end-of-the-year party. Akemitsu cooks a huge feast as well as getting a present for Yuzuki, and he quickly succeeds in impressing the members of the shrine with his fantastic cooking. After they finish eating, Yuzuki suggests they give out presents, which makes him nervous because he has never experienced a Christmas before. The girls later tell him that he can't donate his organs for money as a gift to them either. To replace his gift, they decide he will owe the person who gets his present one favor. When they open their presents, Kurage gets gloves from Tsukuyo. Tsukuyo gets a vibrating toy from Yuzuki, who did not understand her present. Yuzuki gets a paper for marriage registration with Kurage's name, clearly intended for Akemitsu. And the rest of them end up getting their own gifts, so Kagura suggests they all trade, giving him a CD of illicit photos she took of Mia. But Yuzuki quickly threatens Akemitsu to hand the CD over to her. Meanwhile, Kagura reveals the CD was a joke and she actually gives them all tickets to a mixed bath nearby. That night Akemitsu joins Yuzuki in praying to celebrate the closing of the festivities, and she thanks him for all his work these past few months to support the shrine. This has made all of them happier, which hasn't happened since her parents died, and they give each other Christmas presents. Embarrassingly, they ended up giving each other the couple prayer beads from Mary's shop, but grow embarrassed when they realize the connotations. Suddenly, Kiki arrives with troubling news about the Tokyudo. She tells them that the main ceremony will be held in the main hall of the Mikusuki temple, and that the leading members of the sect will be in attendance. But this will be hugely problematic for them because of the terrible state of the shrine's central figure. Still worried about the broken figure, they end up going with Kagura to the hot springs, where all the staff seem to be suspiciously obedient towards Kagura. A staff member points Akemitsu towards a personal spring prepared for him, and then suspiciously makes him drink something. Meanwhile, the girls enjoy the hot spring together while Kagura prepares their rooms. Mia talks about how helpful Kagura has been towards her ever since Mia ran away from her family, as she has always been helping and supporting Mia, and been her best friend since childhood. Secretly, Akemitsu is stuck hiding nearby since he was tricked by the staff members into entering the female side of the bath. He attempts to hide but is quickly spotted by an arriving Kagura, who begins to question the others on what their reaction would be if Akemitsu was hiding from them, and was also in the bath. Faced with this hypothetical situation, the girls would prefer he reveal himself and apologize, which prompts Akemitsu to do just that. The girls quickly punish him but also appreciate his honesty and his attempts to clear up the misunderstanding. Kagura is annoyed that the situation didn't end up so bad, so she starts another plan, telling the rest of them to leave while Akemitsu stays at the hotel. Meanwhile, Mia decides to stay at the hotel too. Later, while relaxing in his private room at the hotel, Akemitsu is shocked when Kagura ambushes him and tries to seduce him. He resists her by punching himself to remove his worldly desires to achieve enlightenment. Meanwhile, Kagura reveals that she had set up this whole situation to get him to leave the temple, because he is an annoying pest getting in the way of her plans, which happens to be corrupting her best friend Mia so that she can return back to her family. Akemitsu knows how much Mia hates her family and their lifestyle, so he becomes offended that her best friend seemingly is betraying her. But suddenly Mia arrives as well. Kagura then uses hypnosis to knock out both Mia and Akemitsu. Akemitsu wakes up imprisoned by her, and she reveals herself to be part of the Baldwin family, a family of retainers that serve the Mia's family, the Kristoffs, and will do everything she can to return Mia back to her family. Akemitsu tries to defend his friend, but Kagura questions his motives at the shrine and tells him he is a distraction to the rest of the shrine. In exchange for him leaving the shrine, she will provide a donation large enough to save the shrine at the cost of him leaving and never returning. After he is freed by her the next day, Akemitsu struggles with Kagura's offer. He joins the rest of the shrine in mochi making, but when he tries to do a good job he becomes disturbed by weird comments Kurage makes about the mochi making process. This distracts him so he doesn't make very good mochi. He later tries to reprimand Kurage, but this doesn't work since she wasn't really joking and was trying to flirt with him. Afterwards, Mia arrives to help with mochi making while dressed in a bunny suit to commemorate the importance of rabbits with the moon, and she gets Akemitsu's help while the two of them are videotaped by Kagura. Meanwhile, only Kurage seems to be wearing a normal costume. Yuzuki arrives to scold them, and he discovers the costumes were all a plan by Kagura to still get him kicked out of the temple. That night Akemitsu is having dinner with everyone when Kiki is missing. After finding out she is drinking outside, he decides to bring her some dinner. She compliments his cooking skill and invites him to sit with her and admire the natural beauty of the shrine. She warns him again about the state of the temple's central figure, but tells him that the Tokudo is not the end goal for Yuzuki and the shrine. One day, Yuzuki will eventually become the head priestess of the shrine, and Akemitsu should start thinking about his role in the future. She gives him hints that he should stay to support Yuzuki, and that she will need someone like him to help her with the shrine in the future. Later, all of them celebrate the New Year festivities, as they all go to a Shinto shrine to make wishes. At first, Akemitsu and Mia wonders if they should hide their identities because they are from a Buddhist shrine, but Yuzuki tells them not to worry. Akemitsu finds Kurage making a wish, but she scolds him for trying to discover the wish of a grown woman, but then she gets distracted by the shrine giving out candy. Akemitsu later compliments Mia on her outfit, but she tells him that women would prefer him to be more direct. This leads to him very brazenly complimenting Yuzuki to her embarrassment. The two of them talk about the upcoming year and Yuzuki's mission to save her shrine. This reminds Akemitsu of the oath he made to her to do whatever he can to protect the shrine, and he goes to find Kagura. Meanwhile, Kagura is praying for success in her plan, and she is slightly tired of spending many years trying to guide Mia to her family's seduction-based philosophy. She was actually behind the plan to get Mia to Japan, which was supported by both their families, as long as Kagura records what happens on a video camera and takes a photo of Mia with at least 1,000 different men. When the two of them arrived in Japan, Kagura started to Photoshop fake men onto pictures with Mia to fulfill her promise to their families, and her work has gotten easier with the arrival of Akemitsu, who seems to be cheering up Mia. Kagura's new plan is to make Akemitsu leave, which would break Mia's heart and lead her down a dark path. Akemitsu arrives to confront Kagura at the temple, but he declines to leave the shrine, which ruins her plans. She reminds him of his dire straits, from his massive debt to the shrine and the broken figure in the main hall that could jeopardize Yuzuki's test. But Akemitsu tells her that he will handle everything, and that he will earn the money himself. But when Akemitsu tells him that he is fulfilling his promise to Mia to support her against her family, this angers Kagura, who tells him that he knows nothing about Mia. She starts to argue with him, but he tells her that she must actually care greatly for Mia, which makes her angry enough to kick him and leave, even though she battles with her own conflicting feelings between her friendship with Mia and her loyalty to her family duty. The day after, Akemitsu confronts Kagura for manipulating her childhood friend Mia. The very mention of her name inspires fear in him. This includes when Yuzuki wakes him up the next morning, and when Mia is saying hello to him. Mia somehow misunderstands his fear for attraction between him and Kagura, and even though Kagura tries to express her displeasure, Mia continues to misunderstand, and she locks both of them in a shrine together so they can get along. Kagura threatens to tell the other girls that he attacked her while they were alone, which would get him kicked out of the shrine if he tells the others of their plans. Akemitsu agrees, and says he just wanted to be friends with her. But Kagura continues to elicit frightening behavior as she easily kicks the shrine door down to allow them to escape. His worst, however, gives Kagura an idea to get him and Mia together, which will create heartbreak for Yuzuki, who will end up kicking them both out, furthering her ultimate goal of getting Mia back to her family. Meanwhile, Sukiya wakes up after having a dream about her and Akemitsu, and it turns out that she was just grabbing her sister Kurage, who was trying to wake her up. After apologizing, Tsukuyo tries to get Kurage to forget everything she heard. As the morning continues, Tsukuyo watches Akemitsu interact with Mia, and she gets slightly jealous. Kagura with her camera takes advantage of her fears and she starts to turn Tsukuyo against Akemitsu, and Mia with videos of the two of them together. Tsukuyo refuses to believe that Mia has feelings for Akemitsu, so she attempts to interrogate the girl alongside Kagura. But Mia has no idea what's going on as Tsukuyo attempts to use her seniority in the temple and get a confession from Mia that she likes Akemitsu. Mia actually just likes him as a training partner to achieve enlightenment with. But when Mia starts to monologue on the benefits of enlightenment and expresses her admiration for Akemitsu, this causes Tsukuyo to be suspicious as well. Alongside Kagura, they tie up Mia to interrogate her further, but after a confused Mia tries to get free, the rest of the shrine hears her cries for help and they arrive to clear up the situation. Later, Akemitsu becomes worried for the temple because they are both broke and running out of food. He tries to cook their next meal with the rest of their supplies but finds out that they have absolutely nothing left. Lia hears his pain cries and they come up with strategies to get more rice. Luckily, Yuzuki steps in and informs them that the shrine actually owns some land, and they can get rice from the nearby townspeople. On the way to the farm, Yuzuki tells them the importance of the shrine and the community, and how the members of the shrine should forge stronger connections with the villagers in their community. They go to different houses to ask for tribute, but unfortunately they either get ignored or people ask them for impossible favors in exchange for rice. In the end, they end up going to a disabled parishioner's house and are able to get rice. As they meet the woman and her family, the woman admits to Akemitsu later that the Mikuzuki temple probably has trouble getting tribute due to Yuzuki's mother being missing, and residing in the main temple instead. Eventually, they are led to the backyard where a huge amount of straw bags filled with rice are, and Akemitsu remembers the first day he met Yuzuki since she was holding similar bags. Yuzuki then leads them away, showing off her strength by carrying many bags. Later, with Yuzuki's Tokudo ceremony fast approaching, a test for her to become a priestess, and something she must accomplish to save the shrine, she alongside Akemitsu and Mia train hard for several weeks. Unfortunately, since the Tokudo needs to be in the shrine itself, the Mikuzuki temple must find a way to repair the figurehead of the shrine. The cost is immense, but Yuzuki is determined to do anything she can to get enough money to fix the figurehead. Akemitsu wants to make sure she doesn't try to do everything herself, but when he goes to help he finds her in a maid uniform. He tries to tell her that he wants to help her mission, but her uniform keeps distracting him. She tells him that he needs to focus on his monk training instead of earning money, even though Akemitsu tells her that she is being stubborn. Yuzuki proudly tells him that she will work 6 jobs all at once to get the figurehead fixed, and that this is important to her because her mother also struggled to support the shrine alone. Akemitsu continues to argue that he can help since he has work experience, but their arguments keep getting derailed because she is in her maid uniform. In fact, Yuzuki didn't realize that she was wearing it all along because she passed out after work from her previous job. Akemitsu helps to get Yuzuki to relax with stretching, but their activities wake up Tsukuyo, who becomes suspicious. After she nervously confronts them, Tsukuyo watches them argue about Yuzuki overworking herself in all her jobs, especially since Yuzuki keeps falling asleep standing up. Eventually, Akemitsu has enough after Yuzuki tells him to do whatever he wants, and after he asks Tsukuyo to go out with him as he leaves. Tsukuyo is so struck by his words that night she dreams of marrying Akemitsu, and in her embarrassing dream she ends up headbutting her Kurage while she wakes up. And that morning, after putting on her best outfit, she meets Akemitsu outside the temple, but is shocked when he shows up wearing the exact same clothes he always wears. This relaxes Tsukuyo, who is thankful that this isn't a date, but she gets more confused after he compliments her outfit. As they walk to town together, he asks her for advice and shows him a couple's phone plan, which embarrasses her further. They end up going to a phone shop together where he buys a new phone plan, and Tsukuyo becomes embarrassed by the clerk who thinks they are dating. Later, he gives her a juice box and starts to go home, but Tsukuyo stops him from leaving as she tries to somehow ask him to clarify his intentions. Unfortunately, she only manages to ask him to trade contacts with him, which makes her his first contact on his phone. He later tells her that he bought a phone to help him with secret activities, but this only confuses Tsukuyo again, who fantasizes that he got a phone to secretly text her. This isn't helped when he sends her a sweet text saying "I love you" that night. Meanwhile, Yuzuki has a dream that night remembering when her mother asked her to take care of the temple, but she didn't remember what her answer was as a child. She wakes up feeling stressed and depressed because Akemitsu hasn't spoken to her since she yelled at him. Then she becomes troubled when she sees Akemitsu and Tsukuyo together after they come back from town. Akemitsu also feels bad for arguing with Yuzuki, and he tries to apologize to each other, but they have trouble communicating. This leads to Kiki taking him aside to talk with him, and she becomes concerned until she realizes they had their first couples quarrel. She gives him advice about Yuzuki, and tries to use an analogy about the moon to get him to think about his true feelings for Yuzuki. Akemitsu is a little dumb, but is able to talk about his admiration for her hardworking nature. Suddenly, Kurage arrives telling them that some temple supporters have come by, and they want to end their relationship with the temple. Kiki springs into action, because they can use this opportunity to get money from their former supporters. Kiki plans to charge them to help the temple, but she finds them already leaving. Yuzuki explains that she let them go for free to continue the tradition of their mother who never charged people who leave the temple. Yuzuki tries to encourage herself, but she and Akemitsu become shocked when a disappointed Kiki tells them she won't be training Yuzuki anymore. Meanwhile, Yuzuki struggles to remember what she told her mother. She tries to get started on training without Kiki by cleaning the temple, but Akemitsu has already cleaned everything possible, and has also done all the chores in the temple. He happens to be missing, so they all wonder where he is, and they become shocked when Tsukuyo is the only one with his contact information. Yuzuki leaves and becomes determined to do something useful, but she finds there really isn't anything to clean in the temple. She later goes into town to find some work to get money for the temple, but she runs away after becoming uncertain. Meanwhile, Akemitsu begs Kiki to continue Yuzuki's training, but she threatens to end his training, and tells him that Yuzuki needs to figure out some important lessons herself. Suddenly he gets a call from Tsukuyo telling him that Yuzuki has suddenly gone missing. A worried Akemitsu then runs out into the rain to go look for Yuzuki around town, but he has no luck. At the same time, a depressed Yuzuki is hiding from the rain in a cardboard box. A feverish Yuzuki remembers her mother leaving the temple a few years ago, telling the rest of the family she could not support the shrine anymore, and that the Mikuzuki temple was doomed. She starts to wonder if she was somehow responsible for driving away her mother, and this has led to her obsession to save the temple. Meanwhile, a panicked Akemitsu checks his old cardboard box under the bridge, and manages to find Yuzuki hiding there. Finding her crystallizes his feelings for her, and they embrace as the rain stops. Yuzuki later wakes up in her room the next day, as Akemitsu brought her back home. The two of them apologize to each other for their arguing, and they reconcile their differences by talking about their family history. Akemitsu realizes that due to his hatred for his father he keeps isolating himself from others. Meanwhile, Yuzuki starts to cry when he promises to support her and the shrine. She asks him why he cares so much, and he tells her that since she loves the Mikuzuki temple, he loves the temple as well. And Yuzuki remembers that as a child she told her mother she will always love the temple. Meanwhile, the rest of the shrine arrive thankful for Yuzuki's return, but also angry at her for worrying them. They tell her since they are all part of the temple she shouldn't keep working alone, and they should all be a part of saving the temple. Kiki arrives and Yuzuki apologizes to the head priestess, saying that she had lost sight of her ultimate goal, and she begs for her training again. Kiki agrees and tells Akemitsu that Yuzuki is now ready to become a head priestess. That night, Yuzuki tells Akemitsu that she is going to quit all of her part-time jobs and rely on the supporters of the temple to donate and repair the temple figurehead. She now understands that to protect the temple it is okay to rely on others, and Akemitsu looks forward to supporting her dream of saving the temple. And this is all for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.